If you're texting today, you better be texting Jesus. If you're in the front, turn and look this way. Like, we are all the way to the back where people are seated, and this is just awesome, which makes it more important that this wall gets blown out and we start making some more room for more people, your friends and neighbors. I'm so glad to be with you guys today. My name is Lee, and I've been here a number of times, and Rusty keeps bringing me in. And I know you're in this Family Strong series, and Rusty said I should come in and talk about sex because he doesn't know anything about it. And so I thought I would do that, but actually we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about marriage. But before we jump into that, let's talk about the Cowboys. All right? No, listen. So at the church I serve in Vegas, we have this ongoing dialogue where we basically despise Cowboy fans, right? So it's just become a thing from the stage where we always talk about, if you're a Cowboy fan. And a couple weeks ago, I mentioned it. I'm like, Cowboy fan, and there was like none. I thought, they've all left the church. Like, literally, we have driven them. And we're fine with it. It's great. So we don't care if they leave the church. My wife and I were getting on the plane yesterday to come here, and I'm standing in the, the Southwest herd, A20, whatever I was. And here's this guy, Pastor Lee, and he's got his cowboy gears on. He's from the church. He's coming up here to watch the Cowboys. I'm like, dude, you're killing me. But so I understand there's a game this afternoon, and though I'm not a big Seahawks fan, I will be rooting for the Seahawks today because we always root against whoever the Cowboys are playing, right? I mean, we root for whoever the Cowboys play. There was actually a couple Cowboys fans in the earlier service. Are there any in here today, right now? What? Right in the front. Shame, shame, and shame. Over the last couple of weeks, Rusty's jumped us into this series about family, and God has a lot to say about that. And so, God has a lot to say about that too. A lot to say about family, and God is the one who established family. So I think anytime we gather in a church environment, a church community like this, and can talk about it, I think it's helpful. So we're going to dive into Scripture in just a second, and you've got some notes that you can follow along and maybe go over even later when you're outside of here. But a few years ago, there was a movie named Juno that came out. I'm not endorsing the movie, but a lot of you have probably seen it. And the deal with the movie was this gal, Juno, she found herself pregnant as a teenager, and she was trying to figure out what she's going to do and the options that she had. And she lives with her father and her stepmother, and she eventually in the movie decides that she's going to go ahead and have the baby and then give the baby up for adoption. So as a part of the movie, she meets this potential couple who would like to adopt her child. And they have all kinds of issues. And so when you watch the movie Juno, you see a glimpse of people whose relationships are a mess. Right? Juno and her relationship with her boyfriend is not good. Her parents' relationship is a disaster. The couple who is going to adopt her baby, their relationship, she finds out, is a disaster. So she has this conversation with her dad about halfway through the movie. And her dad is really this wonderful guy. You're watching the movie and you keep waiting for him to get funky, but he never does. And in this conversation, she asks this profound question. Here it is. She says, I guess I wonder sometimes if people ever stay together for good, like people in love. I just need to know that it is possible for two people to stay happy together forever. What she's asking is this. I look around. It didn't work for you, Dad. It's not working for this couple that I'm now trying to decide if I'm going to give them this child. And I'm looking around and I'm wondering if lifelong, lasting, healthy marital love is even possible. And we all have come to junctures in our life where we've asked that question, because here's the deal. In spite of what you've seen, in spite of what you may have experienced or are currently experiencing, in spite of what you saw as your parents experience, in spite of the current culture, there is something in me and there is something in you that actually believes that this is possible. That love that lasts forever is possible. What's even crazier is that you and I think it's possible personally for us. For us. We think we're all going to have our notebook moment, right? That we're going to grow old together. And we're going to walk around and people are going to see us as we kind of hunch over and they're going to go, oh my gosh, those people are so in love, right? And then we're going to get to the point where we die together and we're just going to be hand in hand and we're going to be in front of Jesus. We all actually think that is possible. We want that to be there. And I think that the reason it's there is because God placed that as a part of us. That part of the image of God that's embedded in us actually believes that there is someone special that God can connect us to. That there's an individual that we can have intimacy and communication with at a depth and a level that goes beyond what we've seen or even what we've experienced, and can actually go beyond even our lives as we continue on, as we discover our own flaws and our failures, as we put on weight, as we age, and we realize we're not the richest or we're not the cutest. We can still have that thing. We believe that love can last forever, that we can grow old together, that we can go the distance. But the truth is, your answer to the Juno question today is most likely this: yes, I think it is possible, but for me, I'm not sure it is probable. It's probable. Now, falling in love, that's probable. That's pretty much a given. There's something in you and I that says we're going to fall in love, and we're going to fall in love hard, and some of you have done that, and we're going to make something special. But our challenges that we see in Juno and we see in our lives, how many single people we have in the room? Raise your hand. Single people? Awesome. Cool. Awesome. The Cowboy fans were much more aggressive, like, yes, and you're like, single, I'm right here. Right? But here's the deal. If you're married, maybe some of you have been married just a short time and you're just still trying to figure it out. How of you have been married a lot longer and you're like, yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out and do this thing, right? Well, here's the deal. There's two challenges that we have. One is that we have a lack of models. That there really isn't. Now, there are some, but there really isn't a ton of where we see just this model of how do you do marriage well, and how do you finish stronger than what you began, and how does your love not just start at the altar with a ring exchange and then go downhill from there, but how does that actually become the beginning of something that becomes more incredible and more awesome as we go along? I think all of us would say it is a struggle. Again, they exist, but it is a struggle to find models. What's interesting about that is even in Scripture, when we look at marital models, Rusty and I were talking about this last night, it's really hard to find solid marital models in Scripture. It's tough. And then, secondly, the other challenge is not just our lack of models, but that all of us bring a lot of mess. So, unfortunately, with marriage, it's like church. Church would be great if it wasn't for people. And so, marriage would be awesome if people were not involved. And so we all bring our mess to the marriage, right? And we settle in together, and we have to do that. We have things in our lives, maybe our adolescence, we grew up, and there's things like affirmation and approval and mentoring and security and support. And if we don't have that, and then we get married, right? And we bring that deficit to the relationship. So now you're in this relationship where you're thinking maybe that deficit can get made up. Am I going to get this from you in our relationship, or are you just cute? So we're equipped to fall in love, but we're not so equipped or wired to actually stay in love. But into all of this, here's the hope. God actually speaks. And that's what we're going to hone in on today, that God has an ultimate and a better design for all of us beyond what we choose, what we've seen, or what we maybe have even experienced. And so over the next few moments, I just want to give you a foundation. Just a foundation that we begin with, and then build upon that all the way into a concept that may make you extremely uncomfortable for a moment, and then some applications that we can take off into our afternoon that could change the trajectory of your current marriage, or for those of you that are single, your future marriage that may happen down the road. Now, it actually starts on the last night that Jesus and his disciples, his closest followers, that they would spend together. And they've gathered around, and we have our community, the bread, the juice. They've shared a meal together. Judas has already left into the night to run his errand that he's going to begin to do. And Jesus breaks into the conversation. Again, these are some of the last words that he's going to share with them. And he says something really outrageous. He says the following in John 13:34. John, who was there, records it. He says this: "A new command I give you, love one another." Now stop, okay? When you're sitting there and you're a Jewish man, and Jesus says, "A new command I give you," as a Jew, you should have got up and said, No, there are no new commands. I'm out of here, Jesus. Like, you don't get to just make commands. Like, Moses gave us the command. You don't get to just change them. You don't get to just give them to us. We don't create new commands, but Jesus was and is. And he says, here's that new command. Love one another as I have loved you. So I've been your example. So you must love one another. This is an epic moment, you guys, because Jesus is reducing the Jewish law, the whole of Jewish law, into one law relationally. And he probably went around the room. We don't have it recorded, but he probably went around there like, what are you talking about? Love one another. He said, listen, Peter, when I called you, you were a mess. You're a fisherman. I called you. You fell on your face before me and said, no, I can't follow you. And I said, no, I love you. Come. I'm gonna make you a fisher of men. Oh, and Matthew, you were a tax collector. Everybody hates you. And I called you and I said, come be part of our group. I loved you. And then I went to your house and you gathered all your tax collector friends the very first night that we met, and we gathered together. And oh, Simon, we know him as a zealot. A zealot in that time would have been like a rebel against the government. So you have Matthew, who's collecting taxes. He's a government employee. And you have Simon in the same group who hates the government, would have hated Matthew. And Jesus is like, I'm going to bring you all together, and I'm going to demonstrate what love looks like. And by the time we get done, you are all going to love one another. And so when they're sitting there, and Jesus says, this is the new command, that you live in the way that I have demonstrated for you, they shook their head and said, we get it. Love one another. Love as Jesus did. And this, here's the point. This applies to our marriages. Now, here's the challenge with marriages. We have so much help for our marriages, and it's good, right? We go to counseling, love languages, what's your love language, all of that. All the guys like, my love language is touch all the time. Touch me, right? I don't know why that always happens. We have love languages. We have all this stuff, right? And all of that's good. But here's Jesus giving us a very simplistic command that can become the foundation of what our marital relationship is about if we can just get back to that, right? We can understand what it is to love one another. We get our cues from Christ, not from our culture, right? The cultural things that help grow our marriages are important. We read the books. We do all those things. That's awesome. But we take our cues from Jesus. Now, my wife and I have been married 28 years. We actually got married in Seattle, just south of here. And it was an August evening. It was hot. And we got married in this church with no air conditioning. So it's like, we're melting, right? We're doing that. And it was awesome. And we got married 28 years ago, and it's all of that. But what I didn't realize at the time that I began to realize very soon after is there were things that we brought to the marital relationship besides ourselves. I mean, I brought my own box of hopes and dreams and desires, right? This is what I want. This is what I'm looking forward to. Even if you're single and you're not dating anyone right now, you may even sit down and kind of mentally script some of that out. If you've ever been in a relationship or seriously dated one, if I'm ever married, here's what I would want that to look like. Here's what our money would look like. Like, we would have so much money. And we would just love Dave Ramsey, right? We would just love those envelopes, those freaking envelopes, right? Putting our money in the envelopes, right? We would just love that. And kids, right? We would both agree, like Rusty, like we're gonna have 25 kids, or some of you are more, calmer and you have like 2, or we're gonna agree on that, right? And she's always gonna wear this to bed at night. Like we're always going to put Kenny G on and go to bed at like 9:30, and it's just going to be Passion City forever, every night for 50 years, right? All these things. We have these hopes. Some of you are laughing because you're feeling me right now, right? And we bring all of that. How conflict will be handled. How are we going to divvy up the responsibility and the chores? We have this grand idea of what the future is going to look like relationally. The challenge is when I came to that very steamy, hot August night with this daydream about the future, it organized itself mainly around my hopes, my dreams, and my desires. Because here's the deal. When we're single, we never daydream or look forward to being the perfect person for someone. We don't. I dream about that person who would become that perfect person for me. So when I met Tanya, I thought, wow, she is the perfect person for me. I bought her a wedding ring. I brought it to the altar along with my hopes and my dreams and desires that she had no idea about. And everything I wanted in that relationship seemed perfectly normal to me. Why wouldn't she want to fall in line with that? Why wouldn't our relationship just be centered around those things? But what I realized pretty quickly is she had her own bundle of hopes and dreams and desires that she brought to the relationship, that she brought to the wedding and to the marriage, and it seemed perfectly reasonable to you. But here's the problem. When we hand our hopes, we hand our dreams and our desires to someone else, to them it's not hopes, dreams, desires. To them it's expectation. So we think, oh, this is awesome. This is what we're going to do. And they're going, this is what you expect? I didn't know that that's what we were getting into. Expectations are these subtle but strong beliefs of what will be the case in the future, the way that I picture it and say it. That's why we say things, you've never said this, but why we say things like, this is how you're supposed to respond, dear. This is what a wife should do. This is what my dad used to do. Because I have these hopes, these dreams, these expectations. So here's the deal. How do we manage that? Because if we bring those expectations, and how do we get past them? How do we manage that so we can get to a place, and many of you have, where we can live out a long-lasting, healthy married relationship? And it's this singular idea that's going to make some of us completely uncomfortable. But it's just the essence. It's the substance of what a healthy Christian marriage is all about. And it's not about roles. It's not about rules. But it really comes down to this. A healthy marriage is a submission competition. A submission competition. That's where both people are racing to the end of the line. That's where the husband and the wife are both pushing forward the other individual. When there's not bargaining or negotiation. Well, these are the hopes I had. Well, these are the hope I had. Well, I'll trade you that hope or that desire for that dream. No. But rather a commitment to submission. Now, Paul talks about this, and every time we read Paul, we had this conversation with the band before the first service. Every time we read Paul, one of the mistakes we make is that we don't read Paul through the lens of what Christ said. So I want to read one of the most controversial things that Paul said, but I want to read it through the lens of what we just read, where Jesus said, I give you a new command to love one another, okay? And some of you, the verse I'm about to read, ladies, some of you, this is why you're still like, I don't know about this church thing. Some of you may have left the church over this verse. Here it is, right? Rusty referred to it early on in this series. It says this, wives, wives, submit yourself to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. Now, if this bothers you, I am so glad if it bothers you, right? Because I want to change your perspective for just a moment, all right? Here's what you need to understand. When Paul said this, and he wrote it, and at the church in Ephesus, they're just new followers of Christ, man. They're just trying to figure this thing out, and they read this. This would not have been a controversial statement at that time, okay? Ladies, I need you to hear this. This would not have been like, what? They would have been like, duh. Right? Now, here's why. Because in that culture, a wife's relationship was largely a legal arrangement, right? It was very hierarchical. The structure was there. Women were not placed at that highest level. And so there would have been just the normal expectation that a wife in a legal way would have submitted to the authority of her husband. If a woman were to even be allowed to testify in some sort of legal proceedings, which rarely would happen, but even if they would, their testimony would largely be pushed aside as like it cannot be considered something that would be relevant or actually would be considered substantial for what's going on. So when Paul said this submit word, it was like, I get it. But here's what's interesting. In the original Greek, the New Testament that we have, the best that we have examples of it is written in Greek. Okay, so way back, these guys that do this research and scholars, and they go back and they find the original Greek. In the original Greek, the words "submit yourselves" were not included. Here's how it reads: "Wives, to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. I just learned that this last few weeks. That the word submit yourselves, and you're like, oh, well, that makes me feel better. Now, wait a minute. Here's how the Greek language works. In the Greek language, when there's a verb missing, they call that an inference. So what that means is the verb is inferred from whatever came prior, and it's inferred. You don't have to fill in the blank. So that would make us ask the question, what came before this where they got this submit stuff? I'm glad you asked. Here's what it says. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. So Paul says we're supposed to submit to each other, that there's a submission competition that should be going on that reflects the love that Christ had for us. And so then when Paul says, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands, it would have been, of course. That's what we do. That would not have been a controversial statement. It's a submission competition because it's based on mutual submission. I'm here for you because God was there for me. We have different roles, responsibilities, gifts, talents, but we do not have a different value. Paul was starting at a common place in that culture and laying over this new way of living in the midst of this culture, and it was radical. It was radical. And then he applies it to men because what came next is shocking. Okay? And here's what he says. He says, husbands, what? Love your wives. You guys don't understand this. This is the radical part of what Paul would have said to the church at Ephesus. Because the husbands reading that would have been like, what are you talking about? Like, she's okay. It's all right. Like, it's kind of an arranged deal. Like, she's all right, right? So for Paul to say, if you're going to love each other as Christ did, then it means wives, it means we all submit to one another. Wives, you should submit to your husbands. That's common. And men, you need to love your wives. You need to stop just expecting them to be just you are an authority over them. They are just going to get squashed down. He says, no, you should love your wives. How? Just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. You are responsible to love your wife as if she's you. And men, some of you love your bodies, right? Come on, guys. I mean, I've seen you at the gym. I mean, not you, but I've seen guys like you. I mean, you're looking at me going, he goes to the gym. I know. There is this guy at the gym. And someday I'm going to walk up to him and introduce myself and say, what are you doing? Because he's always in front of me and he's like on the elliptical or whatever. And then he gets off and everybody sees him and he takes out his phone and he's literally like doing this in the mirrors to the left, right? Big mirrors. And he's literally like videotaping him. I mean, he's in the middle of the gym. I do it in the bathroom. He's in the middle of the gym. He's just like right here. And I'm literally looking at people next to me and we're just like, I don't know. Because men, we love our bodies, right? And so Paul says, listen, you need to, because we're in this submission competition, you need to love your wives as Christ loved the church. What women were asked to do in the first century was the norm. What he was asking the men to do was outside the norm. Now, we live in a culture where there's this wrestling, but generally there's this idea of equal value between men and women. And guess what, ladies? The first person who did that was Jesus. Every woman should follow Jesus because he argued and demonstrated your value before anyone else in the world was willing to. And then Paul came along and said, because of the way that Christ values women and because of how he expects us to treat each other and because we are equal, you are to treat them with extraordinary value, dignity, worth. The way that Jesus did that with women was scandalous. Paul says, I know you're not surprised when I told women to submit to their husbands. I'm telling you, men and women, in God's eyes, you are equal value and you are to submit to one another. This is life-changing. And granted, sometimes the church is slow at catching up and leading in this. But Paul says, whatever it is, put her before that. Guys, what does it look like to be in a submission competition? Right? To authentically live that out in your lives. Ladies, what does that look like? Because it starts in a place of mutual submission. You owe me nothing. your best over mine? The best question we can ask, and I want you to write this question down because this is a conversation during halftime of the game today. I want you to have, here's the best question that we can ask when it comes to this submission competition. What does Christ's love in this moment require of me? Okay. Now this question's great just in life, right? But especially when it comes to our marital relationships, when you're in that moment and you're like, I am at the end and I'm grinding, what does Christ's love require me? Because here's what happened. You may be in a relationship. I know you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, my spouse, my husband, my wife, they're not even here. They don't even follow Jesus. So you're asking me to submit to them. Yes, I am. I'm not. Jesus is, right? And you may be sitting there wanting to do this or like show the person next to you your notes like this, right? No. This is about you, right? Not what does Christ's love require of them, but what does Christ's love require of me? That's it. And then you get into a submission competition with your spouse. And it's hard. Some of you are like, oh, it's so hard. It's hard, right? Some of you are married to people that are not easy, right? They're difficult. Some of you are those people who are not easy, right? Because if you say, oh, my spouse is easy, then it's probably you, all right? Probably you. So what is my love? What does Christ's love require of me? Here's three things. Here's three quick applicable points and we're done. What does Christ's love require of me? There's three things. One is this. His love requires that you just completely make the exchange. Here's what that means, is there's a concept called the power of exchange. That in our life, anything that we choose means that we're exchanging something else. So if you're single in here, raise your hand again. If you're single in here again, right? Okay, all the married people are like, single, like awesome, right? Like, seriously, like sometimes you're single and you're like, oh, I'm single. It's like, no. Like there are things that are awesome about being single. Like you can stay up as late as you want. You can do whatever you want. You can eat whatever you want. You can move if you want. You can do whatever you want. Like literally, like if you're single, you need to embrace that right now in your life, right? But when we choose, or when we're led, and when God reveals someone we're going to spend our life with, we need to know that we are making an exchange. And some of us are in marital relationships where that exchange has yet to happen, right? Because when you say, I am exchanging the life of being single, of being my own decision maker, my own will, whatever I want, to being married, that is saying I am exchanging that. Now, that means I believe that being in this married relationship is going to be something better than what I'm exchanging, but I'm still exchanging. Some of us, we need to kind of reflect on, have we fully exchanged, right? Are we fully living as one, as Christ would tell us? Because what love requires of you is to exchange the self-based life for the together-based life, right? That's submission competition. The second thing is that love requires that we live without options, okay? That love requires that we live without options, that our commitment is anchored in contentment. And here's what I mean by that. Some of you, unfortunately, need to walk this back a little, but you've allowed the option of exit to enter your marriage. And I know what happens. You're in a bad argument. You're in a spot, and all of a sudden these words come out of your mouth. Well, just leave already, or I'm just going to leave. And you just want to grab them as they're going out into space and take them back because they begin. What happens is the conversation around exit begins to plant the seed of doubt. And when the seed of doubt is planted in a marital relationship, that's when we begin to struggle with the submission competition. So I want to encourage you, especially if you're newly married, I want to encourage you to avoid. Don't even allow that question, that thought to enter into your mind. That exit is not an option. Okay, now I'm not talking, if you are in a relationship that is abusive, physically, in other ways, here at the church, we want to reach out to you. We want to converse with you. There may be a time when you're in danger for your own life, your safety. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about where you just go, it's just easier to tap out. I don't want to work that hard, right? And part of what happens is we begin to look around and think, the waiter comes over at Denny's and we're like, what if I married him? Right? Or the Starbucks barista guys that's so nice to you every day when you order your chai tea latte. You think, man, what if I married her? Right? What would my life be? It wouldn't be any different at all. It would be the same because you're the same, right? And so what we have to understand is it begins with me. that I'm going to enter into this submission competition, and I'm going to start it, and that contentment is going to result as I pour every bit of myself into trying to help that person reach their God-given potential. What does Christ require of me? A love that exchanges, a love that's without option. And then finally, lastly, love that is tough. It's the last one. Like a rubber band. Right? Those of you that have been married more than 20 years, raise your hand. Right? Keep your hand up. How many of you say love is still tough? Marriage is still tough? Wave at me. Yeah. Some of you are like, yes. It's tough. Man, it stretches you, right? It's difficult. It doesn't necessarily get easier. And our culture has a low threshold for pain relationally. The message every day that you have heard and that you'll continue to hear is if you're not happy in your current relationship, it's because you chose poorly. So get out and start over. But if you talk to people like those that raise their hand and they're still in love and you ask them about your approach, they'll probably tell you honestly that there are so many moments where they've wondered if they had chosen the right person, but they decided, I choose to be the right person. And then I'm going to enter into this competition of submission, and I'm going to follow Jesus' ultimate command that sums it all up, where I'm to love one another even as Christ loved me. And I'm going to begin there, and I'm going to end there. And I'm going to do what Christ's love requires of me. Because when that happens, our families are strong. Our marriages are strong. And even more so, we reflect Christ to those who have not discovered him yet through the marriage that we live and the way that we love the spouse that God has given to us. Let's pray together. Father, we're so grateful for you and for the way that you enter into these even tricky areas of our lives. And God, we know that the concept, the institution of marriage and husband and wife was something that you set in place, that you've blessed. And God, I know that there are some in this room that they've had failures in this area. They've had marriage failures, and they've maybe even today they're starting over in a new relationship. God, I pray that you would just redeem that you would bring healing to that. And God, that throughout this room and throughout this church community, we would have marriages that would be strong, that would stretch us, that would challenge us, but that God, as husbands and as wives, that we would mutually submit to each other in a way that would honor you and would follow your command to love each other. God, that's our desire. We ask it in your name. Amen.
Amen. There you go. Hey, can we give it up for Lee? Can we do that, please? I love that guy. That is my mentor and my pastor, and he has done a phenomenal job, and he continues to do so, and they have a fantastic marriage. Thank you, Tanya, for raising him well. I appreciate that for sure. But, hey, real quick, I also wanted to let you know of a couple of different things. One is that, you know what, there's multiple reasons I love our church, but one of the reasons I absolutely love our church is because we're always willing to go as far as it takes to help those far from Christ come to get to know him. Doesn't matter what, we were willing to do that. Anything short of sin, we were willing to go after and do it. And that goes for you know, making the stage, physical things, cutting down the stage. Last week, you literally could not walk through the lobby, correct? In between this service and the next, you literally couldn't. And so Pastor Trevor decided, let's just take down that wall. He literally threw a hammer at the wall and forced us to take it down. I mean, there's just multiple things that we've had to do over time to deal with his mistakes. But anyway, but I am so thankful to pastor a church like that says whatever it takes, it doesn't matter, we're going to do that. And so we, by the way, if you're new around here, you can tell how packed this place is. In just I'm thinking probably just a month and a half or so. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's very close to that. Building Hope, a campaign that we started last year, is going to start putting shovels in dirt. And so we are going to be moving this wall out. That stage is the stage is going to be over there. This is going to double the size of the auditorium. Student center right off to the right. It's going to be fantastic, and I'm excited about it. And so thank you for your generosity in making that happen. But I also want to let you know that one of the things that we're going to do right now is we're changing service times, okay? Here's what we're doing. And I know some of you are like, oh, man, Rusty. Yeah, whatever. Come to Jesus. Here we go. So here's what we're doing, all right? And I told that to someone earlier, and they were like, oh, okay, those service times sound great. I'm like, I know they do because, you know, we made them up. So here we go. So here's the service times. we're changing, starting on October 7th, all right? If you come next week at these services, you're going to be by yourself, so don't do that. Here they are for October 7th, 2 weeks from now. 8:30, 9:45, and 11. See? 8:30, 9:45, and 11. Here's why. Because reality is that this service is just completely packed, and we need to make space for those. And so what we're doing is we're putting the most amount of seats that we can have at our optimal hours, where people are more prone to come and hear the message and saving grace about Jesus Christ. And so 8:30, 9:45, and 11 a.m., I hope to see you at one of those services. We would love to have you. One last thing is, again, in just a moment, we're going to be able to have a chance. The buckets are going to pass, and we're going to be able to have a chance to bring back our gifts unto God, that which He has so graciously given to us. Like I said earlier, we were able to bless a lot of military families and those in need with backpacks. Well, here's another thing that we're going to start doing as well. There's an organization called Mechanics on a Mission that have been going for about 6 years now. Pastor Mike and I have actually known them for probably the last 8 to 10 years or so. Great men and women that basically are saying, hey, we're going to give our talents as mechanics to those that are in need, maybe single mamas, whatever it takes. And this church, we're going to get to partner with them too. And so we're excited about that, where you know what? If you're a mechanic in the room and you have spare time in order to help other people that are in need, and again, single moms who are my heroes, by the way, because you have the hardest job in the whole entire world. Thank you for what you're doing and all the effort that you're putting in. We get to support them too. And so there's an organization we're going to get to partner with very, very soon. And so I just want to show you this quick video clip before we sing one last song. Take a look at this.
All right, we're going to sing one last song. Ushers, would you please come forward? Let's stand. Your love is greater. Your love is stronger. Your love awakens me. Your love is greater. Your love is stronger. Your love awakens me. Your love is greater. Your love is stronger. Your love awakens me. Your love is greater. Your love awakens me. All right, thanks so much for joining us. See you next week.